What's going on, guys? It's Tuesday, May 5th. Today, you guys are going to be taking summative on big ideas under the assignments tab. So, mainly I'm making this video to go through exactly what types of problems you're going to see on this test. All right. And I also want to talk about specifically one of the problems, how you need to write your answer in order for big ideas to mark it correct. All right. So again, this is a really important video to watch because I'm going to go over specifics. So here is your assignment. All right. So chapter 10 summative. Again, hopefully you're watching this because I'm going to review specifics about what types of questions you will answer in your online test, as well as how you need to write your answer for specifically one problem. Okay. And that problem is going to be actually number 13, but we'll talk about that more later. Also very important, you only have to complete these questions. All right. So 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 17 in your chapter 10 summative assignment. All right. I'm going to be taking a 10-point summative grade for this. All right. So again, only do those problems. These are the problems that match up with everything we've done so far in this chapter. All right. And everyone should be fully capable of doing these problems. Now, let's go through exactly what types of problems these are going to be. All right. So I have everything written down here. So the first problem on this test, you're going to have to find the domain. All right. So if we remember back to example 1 in 10.1, the first thing we did with this chapter, example 1 says we want to find the domain of this function, right? In order to do that, what do we know? We know that what's under this square root symbol, when we take a square root, we cannot take the square root of a negative number. So what we did was we say that the radicand cannot be negative, so what's underneath this cannot be negative. So we're going to take what's under there, x minus 5, and we're going to set it equal, greater than or equal to 0. Okay? So we're going to write an inequality for that. So we're taking what's underneath the square root symbol, x minus 5, and we are saying it has to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay? We're going to solve that inequality. How? By adding 5 to each side. So my domain is anything greater than or equal to 5. Okay? So that's going to be your answer, or how to find your answer for number 1. So finding domain. That's number 1 on your test. Number 2. Number 2 is graphing. All right, so this is actually going to be decently nice for you on your test because they kind of give you, so here's what they give you. They're going to tell you what numbers to plug in for x, okay? And they're going to say, all right, what comes out for y, and then graph those points. All right, so what you'll be finding is when these numbers are plugged in for x, what comes out for y. All right, that's what you're going to be doing on your test. It should be pretty simple. So you're plugging those numbers into whatever function they give you, something like this. All right, and then I think you have to plot the ordered pairs on the graph as well. All right, but that's number 2, is graphing a function, a square root function. Okay. All right, numbers 6, 7, and 8, we're going to be solving square root equations. All right, so solving square root equations was under 10.2. Okay, so number 6. Number 6 matches pretty well with something like this. All right, so if we wanted to solve the square root of x plus 5 equals 13, to solve a square root equation, we're going to isolate the square root symbol or the expression underneath the square root symbol. All right, so that's what they did here. They are subtracting 5 from each side of this function to get the square root of x equals 8. And now we square each side of the equation to get rid of that square root symbol to get our final answer of x equals 64. All right, so that's our solution there. So that's just like number 6 that you're going to see on your test. Number 7. Number 7 looks something like this, a little more complicated. Okay, so remember, our first goal is to get what's underneath the square root symbol alone. All right, we want to get the radicand by itself. All right, so we're going to subtract this 3 and then divide this 4 to get to our first goal, okay, of getting the radicand by itself. So again, we're going to subtract 3, then we're going to divide 4. All right, and we're going to end up with this. So the square root of x plus 2 equals 4. Now, to get rid of that square root symbol, we're going to square both sides. Okay? That gives us x plus 2 equals 16. And now we're just going to solve for x by subtracting 2. All right, so our solution here is x equals 14. All right, so that's just like number 7 that you're going to see. And finally, number 8 looks something like this. All right, now remember, we discussed this as well. Since I have what's underneath the square root symbol isolated on both sides of the equation, I'm just going to square both sides right away to get rid of those square root symbols. Okay, so square each side of the equation. I am left with, remember there was a mistake here. This is supposed to be 2x minus 1 equals x plus 4. So essentially the square root symbols mean really nothing. Okay, and then we are going to solve that equation to get x equals 5. All right, so that's just like number 8. Okay, number 10 is finding the hypotenuse of a right triangle. So using the Pythagorean theorem to find the hypotenuse. So the longest side, so that's just like this example here. All right, so find the length of the hypotenuse. Remember, we're going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we are plugging in our legs for a and b, 15 and 8 for a and b, squaring them, adding those numbers together to get 289 in this case. And then we're going to take the square root at the end to find what c is. All right, so the hypotenuse will be 17. So that's just like number 10. Number 12. Number 12 is using the Pythagorean theorem to prove that something is or isn't a right triangle. Okay, so that's just like this example here. So it's asking us, tell whether each triangle is a right triangle or not. All right, so if we remember correctly, the longest side's got to be C. All right, these have got to be the legs, so those are A and B. We're going to plug those numbers in, and we are questioning, does it make an equivalent equation or not? When we plug those numbers in and do the math, does it make an equivalent equation or not? So here's just two examples of one where it was a right triangle and one where it's not. So we're just using the Pythagorean theorem to prove is it or is it not a right triangle. Okay, so that's just like number 12. Now, number 13, this is the one that I really want to talk about to make sure you guys write your answer correctly. I know we had some issues with this when we did the distance formula on big ideas. So that's why I want to go over this. So they're asking us for number 13 to find the distance between 2 points. Okay, so we're going to use the distance formula for that, which is right here. All right, so here's our distance formula. We label our points first. Remember, we're going to do all the math. So we're going to do all the math underneath the square root symbol. Okay, now in the end, this is how we're going to write our answer right here. Whatever number you get underneath that square root symbol, just leave it underneath the square root symbol. Don't actually find the square root of that number and round it, okay? Big ideas will only mark it correct if you write it exactly how they want you to write it. And this is all they want you to do. They want you to find what's underneath the square root symbol by doing the distance formula, all of this math. And once we get to that number, you just leave it as the square root of that number is your answer. Okay? So for number 13, again, we want to write our answer to look something like this. The square root of whatever number you get underneath the square root symbol when you do your math. Okay? Really important. We want to write that answer correctly, how the book is going to understand it. All right? Okay, number 14. Number 14 is kind of where we get to sort of word problems. All right, so it's a little more complicated problem, but you're essentially just using Pythagorean theorem to find one of the legs instead of the hypotenuse this time. All right, so it's just like example 2. All right, so again, number 14 on the test is just like this example where you're finding one of the legs instead of finding the hypotenuse. Okay, so remember, 6.5 has got to be our hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. It's the longest side. Okay, so we plug that in for C. 3.5 is one of the legs, and we're finding the other leg. All right, so how do we do that? We would square these numbers, right? Square these numbers to get these numbers, and then we're going to subtract 12.25 from the other side to get 30, and then we take the square root of 30, and they this time round to approximately 5.5. Okay, so that's like number 14. And finally, number 17 is a word problem that reads something very similar to this. All right, so in the book, they use a graphing calculator for this problem, which you can't really do. All right, so I'm going to show you how to do it without a graphing calculator. So it says the velocity y in meters per second of a tsunami can be modeled by this function. Y equals the square root of 9.8x, where x is the water depth in meters. It's asking us at what depth does the velocity of the tsunami exceed 200 meters per second? Okay, so reading this, 200 meters per second. Remember that y stands for meters per second. Y stands for meters per second. So I'm going to take y and replace it with 200. Okay, I'm going to take y and replace it with 200, and then we can just use square roots to solve this equation right here. So 9.8x. So what I can do to get rid of the square root symbol is I can square both sides right away, just like we did in 10.2. I can square both sides. Okay, that gives me this. 9.8x just takes the square root away from this side. Okay, now to solve for x, we're just going to divide by 9.8. 9.8. Sorry, this is sloppy. This is tough. Divide by 9.8 on both sides to find what x is. And our answer should be at a depth of about 41,000 meters. So you're going to round to the nearest meter or whatever unit it is. Okay, so that's what we did here. So again, we just kind of square both sides. We plug 200 in for that variable. Okay, we square both sides, and then we just divide by 9.8. Looks really, really similar to the one you're going to see on your test. Okay, so that's it. There's only 10 questions all in all. So at this time, you guys are going to go into big ideas. All right, and you're going to go into your chapter 10 summative and complete that. Now remember, when you're done, hit your name at the top right and submit it. Okay, if you don't do that, it's not going to submit. So again, I just went through everything that you should be able to do and everything you're going to see on this test. But as always, if you have any questions, please email me or ask me in the discussion thread, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.